So essentially, like, my name is Sandi Fatic. I'm the CEO of Calimero Network. And Calimero Network is essentially an open source framework which allows developers to build self-sovereign applications. So what is a self-sovereign application? It's an application that the user owns the data. And today, it's going to be talk about partially philosophical and partially technical, and it's going to be my experiences and why I joined Web3 and why I think we should nurture, what are the values we should nurture in this industry. And we've forgotten many of them. So disclaimer, I'm not a philosopher. I'm just an engineer with many years of experience working in big tech. So I've been at Facebook, I've been at Google. And several years ago, I joined Near Protocol as one of the first infrastructure engineers. The guys who are interested in AI, the founder of Near Protocol, Ilya, was the guy who invented transformers. And I really had, good time working with them. And 3 years ago, we started this idea of how do we bring privacy and data ownership to the users. And this talk came as a combination of few things. So I am a guy who really likes to read sci-fi stuff. So sci-fi is one part of my life. The second, I built really big infrastructure systems, and I used ML before. So I worked on automatic detection of traffic to prevent DDoS attacks. I worked on automatic releases which use ML. I worked on security analysis which used ML, not AI. So I'm going to talk about a few things. First thing, what is Cypherpunk? This book, Neuromancer, is recommended many times by many people. I don't like putting in slides because it's recycled and every time seen. But I think everybody should read it because it shows us what future in a digital world could look like if it goes wrong. So what happens if big private corporations own our data, own our thoughts, if AI is controlled by only them? It also talks about the hacker culture, about high gadgets, and gives us the blueprint of how to live our life. And if you think about technology, in essence, how I would say progress of technology and privacy technology is one word. It's called rebellion. Email started as a decentralized protocol, SMTP. We centralized it. Governments wanted to read all the emails. We said, let's build encryption. Bitcoin started as an act of rebellion in 2010, after the 2008 financial crisis. And I think we are at the moment today where we have to start another rebellion. And the rebellion is against centralized AI. It's against corporate AI surveillance. And it's about philosophically preserving our essence. So what are the stakes? The stakes are very high. So there's a concept by a philosopher called a panopticon. A British philosopher, Burnham, went to Russia and saw a prison with one tower. And on the tower, you had one light. And the question was the prisoners are behaving pretty well. So why are they behaving pretty well? And they only have one tower and one guard. And the thing was there was a light. The light into the prison. The guards could see everybody what was going on, but the prisoners couldn't see if the guards were watching or not. So the thing is, if you know that you're being watched, but you don't know if you're watched at that time, you will behave by the rules of the game. And I behaved by the rules of the game. I joined big tech companies, and one of the first things they told me is, bring your true self to work. I said, great, bring my true self to work. There's values, we are connecting people, we are doing this. But a friend of mine told me, Sandi, if you bring your true self to work, you'll be fired the first day. And I said, probably, yeah, I would be fired. That's why I'm not there anymore. But the question is no matter what your political opinion is, what is your view, whatever it is, having centralized power is very dangerous. So I'm coming from Croatia, an ex-communist country. One guy could have won the war, or the other guys could have won the war, and they would put the other guys in prison. It doesn't matter, right? So if it centralizes all the AI, every time when we click something, currently 90% of the data we currently have flows to centralized servers. Your email, centralized servers. AI, we are chatting about our deepest thought. Terrible, right? So what are the current challenges I see? What are the towers of surveillance today in the agentic AI space? One is the boom. Everybody's using AI. And it's a good reason why we are using AI, because like, it is awesome, right? Like, you can write code, you can, analyze financial analysis, which you had to do, have 20 people to do it over a month, you do it in days. But all of these things bring privacy pitfalls. Every time when we do something on the internet, when we query a prompt, we give a little bit about ourselves, about somebody. And I asked like my team, we are building in the privacy space, and they told me, it's like, Sandi, we are building peer-to-peer networks, storing the local data of users on the device. And I said, like, it's a lot of data. It's not. I asked everybody, like, take a centralized server, go export your data and see how big is the data footprint you leave. The data footprint you can see about yourself, the things you actually care about. And then take a look about the terabytes and terabytes of data which is stored about you. Why are they storing when I scroll? Why are they scrolling when I click? Why are they serving me ads I don't want to see? Because they make money. And then the third, like, I think danger we are seeing currently in the world is government regulations. So we've seen in Europe chat control, which in my opinion is a bizarre thing. Like, we should not be able to see other people's chat. I think, we went through Crypto Wars 1, Crypto Wars 2, like we shouldn't be discussing this again. But as long as there is a possibility that we can be censored and surveilled, we will be. So I say the corporations own the towers, but we own the shadows in the prisons. So what are the shadows, and how do we get more shadows? By building technology, because Cypherpunk as the movement gives you one thing, two things actually. One thing is quite dark. Hackers in basements and stuff, like not the most fun thing, but it gives you another thing. It gives you a motivational thing to rebel against the system. It gives you a way to build and use technology to solve things which, encryption, TLS, right? We did it many times. So can we use new technologies like FAG, maybe T's, people are against them, for them, peer-to-peer networks, to actually solve and build shadows? So the Cypherpunk philosophy is, humans against machines, Terminator, whatever. I think like machines are just the best thing which ever happened to us, right? So like we should be using them daily, but we should really think about how do we preserve the freedoms. How do we preserve our digital thoughts? For me, I think I already, gave away too much about myself. I think for everybody in this room, they also probably given away. But like, what is for the next generations? How do we build systems so we don't end up in a pretty bad place in the future? And then, who are the true, visionaries and heroes of the digital revolution? They're hackers. Like every single person here who is either supporting a hacker or thinking how do we build this, or activists or people building this software, they are the heroes. And we should not put them in prisons. We have many cases like Tornado Cash and others. People write code. Probably these guys didn't even know they were building something. They're just building cool stuff, right? And we should build cool stuff. And we should build stuff which helps the humanity. And then the last thing, Cypherpunk is motivational, as I said, yeah. It's let's reclaim the power, rebellion. So like what we do at Calimero, we build the shadows, as I would love to say it. So Calimero is a peer-to-peer layer 0, I call it. It's not a blockchain. It's a peer-to-peer network which allows you to store your data on your device. Your device can be your server, it could be your laptop, it could be your mobile phone. And then you selectively share peer-to-peer your data with peers. So for example, instead of storing all your data on Slack, what majority of the companies here do working in Web3 and praising Cypherpunk, you should have a peer-to-peer network of your employees where your data is encrypted and stored on your devices. If you're using Google Docs, for example, maybe we should use a peer-to-peer replacement for that. If you're building agents, you can use peer-to-peer networks to store, shared memory between them instead of storing them on a centralized server. And then this philosophy is, I always said, like we are architects which are embedding values into code. Like really what Web3 was about and why I joined Web3 was because I saw that blockchains could solve my data not being resold to other people. Like that's what I cared about, honestly. I didn't care about so much about the financial part, but I think the financial part is the critical component to make it happen. So what we have to do, I don't know, blah, blah, blah. Sorry, I lost the thread. But essentially, like, we have to build shadow agents. And there's like many tools we are currently building. So today we had like X402. Is a great protocol. It's was HTTP code which nobody used. Coinbase said, let's use it to have macro payments so the agents can interact with each other. Problem, it's not private. If you make, payments on a blockchain and it doesn't use private payments, you have a problem, right? Like, still, everybody can track you. Encryption, really important. FAG, other technologies, etc. So I wanted to say, like, X402 meets private payments. So we should build open standards like this, where we can use USDC, other stablecoins, even tokens, to essentially, on Ethereum or other chains, enable you to do web commerce between the agents. Because the agents have to pay for the compute between themselves. Then they have to be autonomous, so they can, have a wallet and interact. We have seen that people have built already AI agents which trade or make money. And it has to be Cypherpunk commerce. So it has to be peer-to-peer, it has to be encrypted, it has to be available to everybody. And how I see the agentic web is very much of how we built the internet in the first days. So like if you think about like DARPANET, for example, or SMTP, it was you run a centralized service not for other people, but for yourself. And then you peer-to-peer, you send an email to him, and he gets the email, he pulls the email, right? And like, why did we get to a point where somebody is hosting for us this stuff? Very simply, because it was cheaper, the user experience was easier, and like we, at this point in time, should go back to that. So like, you should have your own agent, which is maybe, a TE, if you trust a TE, or you should run your own agent on your laptop device, and the agent should be able to just go directly to the other agents without ever depending on a centralized party. So the vision is like how I call these technologies and how I see it is like every piece of this technology I call like liberation protocols. So TLS was a liberation protocol. X402 is a liberation protocol. Peer-to-peer networks is a liberation protocol. BitTorrent was a liberation protocol. Encryption is a liberation protocol. I have how much time? 7 more minutes. So I have like one last thing which I want to ask to everybody. I didn't want to make this talk about what we do and shill you on the technology which we have. But I wanted to tell a story of what got me into Web3 and what I think are the values we forgot. Because Web3 today is, meme coins. Investors investing in a project which goes up and dies. And all the fundamental values disappeared. So, if you get only one thing from this talk is, first, join the rebellion, and second, don't forget the values of Web3 and the true cypherpunk movement. Thank you for the time. Build a future where data is not a currency, it's an armor. And if you want to learn more about what we do as a company, or if you just want to spin ideas or like talk about cypherpunk, let me know. Yeah.
Okay, I feel very inspired right now. 1, 2, microphone, yeah. Okay, we can start the Q&A session now. So if you have a question, please raise your hand and our volunteer is going to pass you the microphone. Event token.
Do you have a question?
Okay, I guess that's it. Let's give a huge applause to Sandi.
Oh, there is a question.
Oh, sorry, we have a question right there.
Almost forgot about me. Can you explain a bit more about how you tackle in Calimero the issue of X402 private payments, or like private X402?
Can you repeat the question? I didn't.
I'm asking, how do you guys at Calimero are tackling the issue, or like the thing that you call like private X402? How do you tackle it?
Okay, so like XO2, so essentially the way Calimero works is that you have a node, a WASM node, which you install on your local device. And it runs a WASM binary, whatever the app is. And then, let's say the binary is a Slack chat. You have a Slack chat, I have a Slack chat, just to explain like high level what we do, right? So the way it works, we don't use a consensus like blockchains do, but we use a CRDT, a conflict-free replicated data type. Essentially, every time I make a change on my local device, I broadcast it to the network. Based on the CRDT, everybody knows how to apply the changes I made to their local storage and verify if the changes are correct. So for example, if I send a message, I'm the only one who is able to edit this message, and you can verify it on your side. So what you can do is a general purpose framework. You can build different things, like a knowledge graph, for example. You could have an AI knowledge graph which shares the knowledge graph between the AI members, for example, right? And then every time when you make a transaction between the agents, you could just call from the node to make a payment or make a microtransactions or make a subscription for a certain number of requests. So what it could be like, I dump my knowledge graph in a peer-to-peer network, and every time the agent wants to access this knowledge graph, it pays. Like that could be, for example, one example. Or like, you could have like, one of the things like somebody built on a hackathon, the guys were building like, they wanted to do federated learning, but without ever like sharing the data, but sharing the weights. So what they built on Calimero was a weight sharing like algorithm, where I train using Keras my model locally. I just upload the weights to the network. Then somebody else continues. They run on their data and upload the network, like upload their updated weights to the network as well. And they specifically built it for medical, because like medical institutions have a lot of data about patients, but they don't want to share it. So for example, like you can have just a bunch of nodes across the medical institutions, and they just run a model locally. And I mean, how X42 ties into that, like you could have, paid models for a TE, like instead of you running the model, you could just pay a TE, or you could run your own model, or like have, I don't know, FAG, inference, whatever, right? But like you need a way to pay these things, right? Like we could go to a subscription and integrate Stripe, but kind of defeats the purpose, right? Like blockchains are really good at making payments. They're better than anything we have out there. They're cheaper, they're faster. So I think like that will be, the agent can have a private key and a public key, right? It cannot have a bank account. So I think it's like just a natural thing to go with it, right? I mean, I hope I didn't go too long, but.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah, in the right row.
Okay, so thank you for your presentation. Something I was thinking is just like Linux is becoming more and more common by normal users, let's say, not technical people, as well as is Android getting more and more popular. Do you think it will be possible to have some kind of AI that is also open source in a way, or is not keeping all the data, or is it inherently centralized in that way?
So if I understood the question is, open source models are becoming more popular. Do I believe that we will have a model which is as good, or what?
Having some kind of LLM or some kind of AI agent that
we
massively
currently have open source models, but most of them are built by big tech companies which open source the older model and keep the better one, right? So we already have it. The question is like, there is a bunch of researchers who are trying to build, data, like decentralized data enclaves, where you could like build a federated model from the open source data, right? I think like it's a matter of time when we'll get to a point. Currently, like, if you have more data, you have the advantage, right? If you have more compute, you have the advantage, right? So it's harder to compete with the latest whatever it is from a centralized company which has a lot of data. But I think like we can build systems where we can build markets of data to train on without exposing user data, right? Like having encrypted enclaves where you pay, and then you run it inside an execution environment, or like, if FAG becomes really, really fast at some point, you could run on top of FAG in the future. So I think yes. I think like if we stop using centralized services and opt in into like data marketplaces which actually care about our data, then we could build a model where we can not even build agents, but actually build a foundational model which is decentralized. I think that will be much more interesting, in my opinion. Like if we can get to like a decentralized foundational model, and then have some types of racks to access different types of information for certain things to operate on. Like that would be something which I would be very cool. But like it will take a lot of money, resources, time. and it's probably like much harder than to build an agent.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, any other questions? Then let's just give Sandi a big applause.
Woohoo!